So if we look at that piston, uh-oh. Welcome to the shop. I'm Jared, and this is Wrench Every Day. And it's a new year with new exciting projects to get finished up. They're last year's projects, but we're getting projects done. One of those projects are 2008 Dodge Chargers. One of them sitting here behind me is the actual retired cop car. The other one is our movie car, and we're trying to decide which one to build. And based on the comments that we asked for, a lot of you say we should just build this one. We're not gonna get into that today. What we are gonna get into is pulling the engine out of this car and finding out why it blew up. Now, one of the reasons we were able to pick up our parts car here so cheaply is it has a broken engine. It's blown up in some way and locked up catastrophically. And well, replacing engines can get very expensive. Speaking of expensive things, insurance can be a huge expense, especially if you have a large fleet of vehicles. But today's sponsor, Policy Genius, can help you save money there. With a new year comes New Year's resolutions, and two of mine are to stop wasting time and stop wasting money, and Policy Genius can help you with both. Policy Genius makes it easy to compare home and auto policies all in one place. Their team of experts can help look for ways to save you money, including bundling your home and auto policy. Getting started is easy. Head on over to policygenius.com/wrench and answer a few personal questions about yourself and your property. Policy Genius then shows you price estimates for policies that fit your needs and help you find the best option. The Policy Genius team works for you, not the insurance company. If they find a rate lower than what you're paying you now, they'll switch you over for free. Policy Genius has saved customers an average of $1,250 per year over what they were paying for home and auto insurance. Since 2014, Policy Genius has helped 30 million people shop for insurance and place $120 billion of coverage. If you're ready to see how much you can save, head on over to policygenius.com/wrench and get started on your free home and auto insurance quote today. Policy Genius, when it comes to insurance, it's nice to get it right. Alrighty, so our goal today is, even though we don't need this engine, we were all very curious. I was curious, you guys were curious, what is broken in it? Let's take it apart, but in order to take it apart, I have to take it out. So our goal today is we're going to get the Charger up on the quick jacks and get our fluids drained out and get this 5.7 liter Hemi out of the bottom the way they're supposed to come out. And we're gonna get the cylinder heads pulled off of it, the bottom end pulled out of it, and see what broke so badly that this engine does not turn. I did see a lot of you in the comments making suggestions to use Kroll oil or a rust penetrant to try to get a rust ring broken free, that the pistons were seized from sitting. That is not the case in this engine. It is a mechanical failure of some type, where something has broken, is locked up, and just not allowing the engine to turn. It does not feel like a rust ring where the piston rings are sticking into the cylinder wall that can break loose along that way. The best I can gather is this car was driving, was working, and broken some way. I don't know if it's a connecting rod, but we'll get it out. It's a lot of fun, and by a lot of fun, I mean none at all. To deal with a locked up engine, we'll need to unbolt a torque converter, because most likely we're gonna have to pull the transmission away from the engine with the torque converter bolted in, which means we're gonna make a big transmission fluid mess. So we are going to get our cameras going. We're gonna get this thing lifted up and start tearing this engine out of there. Let's get to it. right, and we are making progress getting this engine apart. Normally I would go ahead and drop it out as a whole unit, but unfortunately I couldn't get the lift tables, and the quick jack setup just really doesn't come up enough to safely pull the engine out as a whole assembly. So I went ahead and started pulling the cylinder heads, as you saw in our time lapse. So that engine has gotten a lot smaller. Now, a lot of you were suggesting that I pour ATF down the cylinders to free it up. That only works if it's a rust issue, and as you can tell, the previous owner apparently was using a time machine and read your comments and tried the ATF trick. The problem is, these engines really, it's too new to really expect it to be rusted up that way. And my suspicion was proven correct. I thought, because of looking around in the engine bay, like the heater core hose was new, there's lots of cooling things that had just recently been done, which led me to believe the engine had overheated, and it did the thing that these 5.7s do. So if we look at that piston, let's zoom in. Uh-oh. That's what you call FOD, foreign object damage. And I guess it's not fully foreign because it is part of the engine that should be in there. But it shouldn't be in there. It came from our cylinder head here. So this engine got hot, and then underneath these valves, this is your intake valve, your exhaust valve, and these are what are opening and closing to let air in and out of your engine. And these need to seal against something, because if it were to seal against the aluminum, it would wear very, very quickly. And unfortunately, when they get hot, these seats can come undone and drop out. And once it starts dropping out, they break, make contact with the piston, and really bad things happen. So the guys are trying to do a good job of it. They pulled all the spark plugs out, filled the engine with ATF, thinking it may have been a rust issue, but it is the well-known valve seat issue. So what I want to try real quick is I'm going to go ahead and get a breaker bar back on that engine and see if maybe it turns now. Because most likely what was sticking it is, as you can tell, there's this big chunks of valve seat as well as it being bent. So if it can turn now, it's going to let me go ahead and get this transmission separated and everything pulled off, because I don't have my lifts yet. That's going to change soon, but unfortunately we don't have them yet, so it doesn't help us at all. So let me get those tools and let's see if we can turn this engine over, which is then going to make an even bigger mess of my floor, but that's okay. We'll get a mop bucket in the morning and clean the floor. Okay, we have got the wrench on there, and well, we didn't really need to see me, but we did. So Dwayne hopefully will put in just a quick little tidbit of us trying to turn this engine before. Oh. And my suspicion is this is going to go very easily. We're just going to use fingers. Ah, yes. Look at it move. Listen to those fluids. But, yep. Everything turns over nice and smooth. And vomits all the fluids out nicely. Ah, yes. So we are going to be able to finish taking this thing apart without any issue and get this block out and clean that floor up. But yeah, so if you've got a 5.7, you overheat it, and then suddenly it starts knocking and locks up, you probably dropped a valve seat. So pull the cylinder head. Really, that piston is going to be too damaged to be safely usable, and this head, without substantial welding and resurfacing, really is sufficiently damaged beyond wanting to reuse it. But we know our problem. We'll finish making a hole and see if there's any damage to that connecting rod or anything underneath as well. So, mop bucket in the morning, and we'll keep tearing this thing apart. All right, so we are into the next day. We got a mop bucket, cleaned up the floor for the first round, and we've spilled fluid on it a few more times. The engine doesn't look too much different. We've been working a little bit. We pulled the hood and front bumper, as you could see. And check that out. That's always a fun surprise. A lot of times when these cars are sold, they pull all the cop car stuff off, but we still have our Wheelin' siren there. We do need an amplifier for it to work fully, but I mean, cop car stuff. And some of the other things we did, the hood's gone. That is tucked away. We have got the wiper and crossbar out of the way, so we have all the room to lift this thing up. Because again, normally we would just drop it straight out the bottom with the full subframe, but on quick jacks, I don't want to get the car that unbalanced and risk it trying to topple over. So we have all of our transmission stuff and drive shaft pulled from underneath. You know, we can come around and still see some of the stuff there. There's the drive shaft. I'm going to tell you what, these things have an absurd exhaust. Look at the size of that thing. It just, well, I guess it's extra big too if you pull it all in one big chunk. So, yeah. We've got our big old gantry crane, rolling crane, tucked over the top. So I'm going to get a chain bolted to the top of this engine, and we'll go back to some GoPro and hopefully be able to lift this whole thing up, tilt it enough with the transmission to come up and out. So let's keep going. Well, this is where something exciting, you know, kind of happened. We got the engine pulled out, and my GoPro decided it was done with life. So I gotta buy a new one of those. But we're gonna finish filming with this camera. I'm gonna go ahead and lower the car down so we don't have to pull the engine too much higher, and figured you might want to see that, right? We'll put this back to a working position, and then I'm gonna come back to my quick jack controls. Lift it up so we can disengage the safeties, because this car doesn't need to be off the ground anymore. Let me know if it looks like the transmission's gonna hit, because I can't see very well. Let's pick it up a little more and get it pulled out of there. And that's one blown up Hemi liberated. So let's bring you closer, because we want to pull that one piston out and see what it looks like. All right, so normally you'd probably separate all this and put it on an engine stand, but none of this is really considered good, so we're kind of working with it, just dangling, because it's most likely once we pull the police oil cooler off of it, then brand new alternator, it's just going to go outside and either become a table or go to scrap. One other thing we notice is this oil pan has almost no bolts in it. There's normally a lot of them. We're missing some back here. There's only, okay, it's got the two that come from the back forward, those, and then like 310 millimeters. So it's been into before. Again, we found a lot of ATF because I guess they assumed this was locked up from rust when, unfortunately, it was a drop valve seat, which ATF is not going to cure. I have not found a magical ATF that can reconstitute metal. I'm not going to say it's not out there. I've just not seen it. So something that's kind of interesting, I've not had one of these off. This is what's called a windage tray. It tries to keep the crankshaft from spinning in the oil just above it, and it looks like this windage tray is part of the gasket, the oil pan gasket, which, or am I missing a bolt? No, that does appear to be it. I'm not claiming to be a Mopar expert. Tell you what, the bearing looks pretty good. We look at it, other than, see, my glove's dirty, so it looks dirty, but there's no wear marks in it. It's not beat up, so good on the police heavy use engine that hasn't gone up and come apart in that regard. Oh, also that was the wrong one. Whoops, we gotta go back one more. All right, now that we got the right one, that bearing
looks the same too. They almost look brand new. There's no unusual wear in that. That's impressive. Aside from, you know, dropping a valve seat. There we go. All right, so what I was curious, and you can kind of see that it's happened, is right in this top section here. Those are your piston rings. And they should actually come out a little bit, and you should see an end gap right there. You see that small split right there. That's where it should be springing apart. But because this has damaged and crushed the aluminum on the top, it has actually gone and compressed all the way down and has pinched in these piston rings. That's why anytime you're dealing with an engine that has had something fall in and damage it in some way and hit the top of the piston, you have to be extremely careful, because it is very likely pinched your piston rings and you're not gonna have compression and you're gonna get a lot of piston slap. Aside from the obvious damage when it failed, looking at the piston, you see these thrust surfaces. That is very minimal wear and marking in the friction coatings for an engine that served as a police. You know, it was a police car. Police are not nice to their cars. They're driven very hard. They have a very specific task that they must perform, and are driven full throttle a lot. So I'm gonna say this engine, you know, this 5.7 Hemi has performed extremely well in its life as a police cruiser. Unfortunately, once it got outside of the police maintenance schedules, it developed a coolant leak, most likely based on all the small hoses we saw replaced, overheated, dropped a valve, and ended its life. So I'm kind of excited to see what my new 5.7 is going to perform now that we've got all the electronics that we need to make it work. But again, for this, its future, it's either going to go scrap or maybe make a table for the shop. It'll be kind of cool. You line the pistons up and bolt them to the top or weld them on, set a piece of glass. So who knows? But we're going to get the good cop car stuff, oil cooler, and some of the other small things, and get this thing tucked into the corner for now. But making progress on the Chargers again. We're back in Georgia, able to work on them a little bit. We've got the blue one most likely ready to roll outside for a little bit while we get the engine freed up from our movie car, the non-original engine to it, but the same 5.7 that we have in here, but from an 09, which makes it an Eagle, means it has variable valve timing. I don't know if that's good or bad in these Hemis. Some engines it's not good, but the engines I know, like the Supras, it's very good. So let's hope for that. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me as we tear apart the blown up parts car to figure out, well, why did it blow up? And it was exactly as we expected. But once again, I'm Jared, reminding you guys to always make questionable choices. And when it comes to putting your head under a suspended engine by one chain, don't do it. That's not questionable. That's just dumb. We'll see you.